May 15, 1944. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight David Eisenhower stood in a muddy field in southern England, staring at something that shouldn't have been possible. Stretched before him across 12 square miles of countryside were 50,000 Sherman tanks. Not drawings, not plans, not promises. Actual tanks, painted, fueled, armed, and ready to cross the English Channel in 3 weeks. 50,000. The German Wehrmacht, the most powerful military machine in Europe, had fielded approximately 1,300 Tigers and Panthers, their best tanks, across the entire continent. America had built 50,000 Shermans and parked them in England alone. Eisenhower turned to his logistics chief, a tall, methodical colonel named Leroy Watson, and said something that Watson would remember for the rest of his life. "We're not fighting a war. We're delivering one." That sentence captured everything about the industrial miracle that made D-Day possible. Germany had built better tanks. German engineering was superior. A Tiger could destroy a Sherman at ranges the Sherman couldn't even fire back. But engineering genius meant nothing when you were outnumbered 38 to 1. This is the story of how American factories didn't just support the war. They became the war. And the moment Eisenhower stood in that field, looking at an ocean of steel that stretched to the horizon, he knew with absolute certainty that Germany had already lost. If this story is pulling you in, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because what made those 50,000 tanks possible wasn't just factory workers. It was a complete reimagining of how industrial civilization could mobilize for total war. These numbers matter. The men who built them deserve to be remembered. The numbers behind those 50,000 Shermans tell a story that German intelligence officers literally refused to believe. Each M4 Sherman tank cost $44,500 to build. Multiply that by 50,000 units. That's $2.2 billion worth of armor sitting in English fields. For context, that's more than the entire German defense budget for 1943. But the cost wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the speed. America was producing Shermans at 11 different factories simultaneously. The Detroit Tank Arsenal, built from scratch in 1941, was turning out Shermans at a rate of 1,400 per month by early 1944. Chrysler's plant, Ford's facility, Fisher Tank Arsenal, everyone operating 24 hours a day in 3 shifts. The workers, many of them women who'd never seen a factory floor before 1941, were assembling these tanks using the same mass production techniques that Henry Ford had pioneered for automobiles. Standardized parts, assembly line workflows, interchangeable components. A Sherman wasn't a handcrafted machine like a German Tiger. It was a product, and products could be manufactured at scale. The German approach to tank production was fundamentally different. Each Tiger tank required over 300,000 man-hours to build. Skilled craftsmen assembled them with precision engineering. The quality was extraordinary. The Tiger was mechanically superior in almost every measurable way. It had thicker armor, a more powerful 88mm gun, better optics, superior fire control. In a one-on-one duel, a Tiger beat a Sherman almost every time. But there were never one-on-one duels. When a Tiger encountered American armor, it faced 5 Shermans, then 10, then 15. German tankers had a saying they repeated like a bitter prayer. To defeat 1 Sherman, we need 1 Tiger. But the Americans always send 5 Shermans. Eisenhower's logistics teams had calculated the mathematics of the coming invasion with brutal clarity. Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion, would put 156,000 men ashore on June 6th. Those men would need tanks. They would need replacements when those tanks were destroyed. They would need spare parts, ammunition, fuel. The planning documents estimated that the invasion force would lose approximately 30% of its armor in the first month of fighting. 30% of 50,000 was 15,000 tanks. Germany couldn't build 15,000 tanks in a year. America could replace them in 6 weeks. This disparity wasn't just about factory capacity, it was about the entire industrial philosophy. German tank production prioritized quality and performance. They built fewer tanks, but each one was engineered to perfection. American production prioritized quantity and availability. The Sherman wasn't perfect. It had thin armor. Its 75mm gun couldn't penetrate a Tiger from the front. It had a tendency to catch fire when hit, earning the grim nickname Ronson after a cigarette lighter advertised as always lighting on the first strike. American tankers knew the Sherman's weaknesses intimately, but they also knew that when their tank was knocked out, another Sherman would arrive within 48 hours. When a German Tiger was destroyed, the crew might wait months for a replacement, if they got one at all. When Eisenhower toured that massive tank park in May 1944, he wasn't just seeing armor. He was seeing the physical manifestation of American industrial power. His chief of staff, Lieutenant General Walter Bedell Smith, walked beside him carrying a thick binder of logistics reports. Smith pointed out details that made the scale even more staggering. Each Sherman required 165 gallons of fuel to operate for a day of combat. 50,000 tanks meant 8,250,000 gallons daily. The Logistics Corps had already stockpiled enough fuel in England to run the entire armored force for 90 days of continuous operation. The ammunition numbers were equally overwhelming. Each Sherman carried 90 rounds of 75mm ammunition. 50,000 tanks meant 4.5 million rounds preloaded. The supply depots in southern England held an additional 30 million rounds in reserve. 30 million. If every Sherman fired every round it carried, the supply system could reload them 6 times over. Eisenhower stopped walking and turned to Smith. "Do the Germans know these numbers?" Smith shook his head. "Our intelligence intercepts suggest they think we're exaggerating by a factor of 10. They've convinced themselves our production reports are propaganda. They can't accept that we've actually built this many tanks." Eisenhower stared at the endless rows of Shermans stretching across the countryside. "They're about to find out." The German High Command's failure to grasp American production capacity was one of the great intelligence failures of the war. Even when presented with accurate numbers, Wehrmacht planners adjusted them downward because the real figures seemed impossible. Field Marshal von Rundstedt, commanding German forces in France, received intelligence reports in March 1944, estimating Allied armor strength in England at 40,000 tanks. He crossed out the number and wrote 4,000 in the margin, assuming his intelligence officers had made a typing error. He literally could not conceive that the Americans had built that many tanks. This wasn't stupidity. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of what American industrial capitalism could achieve when fully mobilized. Germany had the most efficient military production system in Europe. Their factories were models of precision engineering. But they were designing and building weapons the old way, as if war was still a craft instead of an industry. America had turned war into mass production. The same country that built 20 million automobiles between 1920 and 1940 could build 50,000 tanks between 1942 and 1944. It was just manufacturing. The product had changed. The process hadn't. On June 6, 1944, when the first Shermans rolled off landing craft onto the beaches of Normandy, German commanders finally understood what they were facing. Tank after tank after tank. Destroyed Shermans were pushed aside, and new ones took their place. Damaged Shermans were repaired overnight by mobile maintenance crews carrying standardized replacement parts. The Americans fought differently than any army the Wehrmacht had encountered. They didn't try to preserve their tanks. They used them. When a German tank commander had to weigh every engagement carefully, knowing his Tiger was irreplaceable, American tank commanders could take risks. They could probe enemy positions, accept losses, and come back the next day with fresh armor. The Battle of Normandy lasted from June 6th to August 25th. Those 80 days, American forces lost approximately 4,000 Sherman tanks. 4,000. That would have represented the complete destruction of the German armored force 3 times over. But for the Americans, it was 15% losses. Acceptable, sustainable. The supply ships kept coming. The replacement Shermans kept arriving. By September, American armored strength in France was actually higher than it had been on D-Day, despite 2 months of brutal combat. The Sherman production miracle had deeper effects on German morale than any single battle. German tankers, some of the best trained soldiers in the Wehrmacht, began reporting a psychological phenomenon their commanders called Sherman fatigue. They would destroy 3 American tanks, 4, 5, and then see 6 more Shermans approaching from another direction. They would knock out an entire platoon and watch a new platoon arrive the next morning. One captured German tank commander, a veteran with 17 tank kills, told his interrogators something that appears in the official after-action reports. "We could win every battle and still lose the war. They have so many tanks that our victories mean nothing. We destroy 5 Shermans and they send 10 more. We cannot kill them faster than they build them." That sentence captured the strategic reality more clearly than any staff analysis. Germany was fighting World War II as if it were still 1918, where industrial capacity mattered, but skill and tactics could overcome numerical disadvantages. America was fighting the first truly industrial war, where production capacity was the decisive weapon. The assembly line had defeated the craftsman. Mass production had beaten precision engineering. The final accounting tells the complete story. Total Sherman production during World War II exceeded 50,700 units. Variants included the standard M4, the upgraded M4A3 with a more powerful gun, specialized models for different terrain and roles. Germany produced 6,000 Tigers and Panthers combined. The kill ratio favored German tanks. A Tiger might destroy 5 or 6 Shermans before being knocked out. But mathematical ratios don't win wars. Available units do. When the war ended in May 1945, Germany had fewer than 100 operational tanks remaining. The United States had 19,000 Shermans in Europe alone, with thousands more in the Pacific and in storage. Eisenhower's observation in that English field in May 1944 had been prophetic. America wasn't fighting a war in the traditional sense. It was delivering one. The Sherman wasn't the best tank of World War II. It wasn't the most heavily armored or the most powerful. But it was available. It was everywhere. And when you're fighting a war of attrition, being everywhere is more important than being perfect. Those 50,000 Shermans didn't just carry American soldiers into battle, they carried the industrial capacity of an entire continent. They were factories on tracks. And standing in that muddy field, looking at an ocean of olive-drab steel stretching to the horizon, Eisenhower knew that Germany was already defeated. They just didn't know it yet. The war would continue for another year, but it had already been decided. In Detroit, in Chicago, in the factories where American workers, many of them women, built the weapons that ended fascism in Europe. The German tankers were right to fear the Sherman, not because it was superior, but because it was infinite.